you were talking about the different types of labels earlier that you said you didn't know about. Now
Yeah.
that's really funny because I actually knew about a lot of those things beforehand. I think like asexual, right?
Hmm.
If you don't know what asexual means, these are people who don't feel like sex is very important to them. They can kind of do without it. Sometimes there are people who they call themselves like asexual or ace, put themselves in the ace spectrum. Sex is just not an important part of their life.
Or they don't feel it. They don't feel a natural drive. It doesn't mean they don't have sex, but they don't crave it.
Yeah, or they crave it to a lesser extent, or
Hmm.
they might only crave certain types of sexual acts. Like there's lots of different ACE categories.
Hmm.
You might see people describe themselves as demisexual. That usually means that you need to have a emotional connection before you can have sex. And then there's the opposite of that, which is megasexual, which basically means you don't have an emotional connection until you have sex.
Hmm.
So some people need the emotional connection first, then they can have sex. That's demi. And some people need the sex and then they can have the emotional connection. That's mega. There's hypersexual, right? Those are
Hmm.
people who are like the opposite of asexual. They want to have sex all the time. Sometimes people might consider that like pathological to an extent, like where they're like a sex addict, if you've heard of that
Yeah, on
before.
the extreme end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So that would be the extreme end. But there's other people who just feel like they need to have sex twice a day, 3 times a day. I would say that's in the hypersexual
definitely,
category.
definitely.
I might lean toward that. And then you have an interesting one that I like, which is the gray and the fraysexual. Fraysexual is one that's kind of interesting to me. If you want to look it up, and it's FRAY sexual. That's when people who they feel curious about sex, but when they have sex with that person, like their interest kind of fades. So it's like there's curiosity, but then they have sex and the interest fades. So if that happens to you, you might consider yourself fraysexual. There's allosexual. Those are people who are more interested in sex with themselves. So there's lots of different types of sexual labels.
Yeah, and also, would you consider this like spectrum of sexual drive and desire?
I think that some of them can be put on a spectrum, but I'm not sure that I would say that they're all like on a spectrum. I think they
Some
all
are
describe,
descriptors.
yeah, exactly.
So basically, because okay, when we're talking about like asexual versus hypersexual,
Mhm.
that's on a
That's a
spectrum,
spectrum.
right?
Yeah.
But then some of the things like demi versus mega, that's more a descriptor
Yeah, I think
of
so.
how someone shows up sexually.